Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this special day, at least for us. It's amazing to see all of you here in this call. So we are really excited to officially introduce the Scrum Guide expansion pack to you, which Jeff Sutherland, John Coleman, and I wrote over the last couple of months. You might have asked, what is the idea behind that? And it is intended to be a practical complement to the 2020 Scrum Guide. It clarifies, it extends, and it aligns with the Scrum in realities where we often see it now these days with modern product development and the new available technologies we see coming up. So the Scrum Guide itself still remains definitive, but it can be at occasions a little bit be opaque. So while books about Scrum really help us to understand it, how to apply it in certain contexts, they still don't often go deeper enough into clarifying what Scrum is really all about. So we strongly believe that this document will fill this gap and explain a little bit more behind the ideas behind Scrum in certain contexts and how to apply it. So today we will show you this extension pack, and hopefully you will get some value out of it as well. So the first thing we'd like to talk about is the stronger emphasis on products in Scrum. So this, and I think, probably some of you, if you have attended a training or something like that, it's really this product over project thinking. And I think it has become much more prevalent in the last couple of years, this product thinking over a project thinking. And projects are temporary. Products are ongoing. We have them once we created them until we retire them eventually. So Scrum supports outcome-driven work, not just short-term delivery. And now product thinking is much more emphasized, fully emphasized. And if you really think back now, if I remember correctly, maybe Jeff, you can correct me, but Scrum was shown 1995 at the UPSLA conference in Austin, Texas in the first form. And we had a product owner since then already. So this product mindset was really clearly emphasized. So that's an important aspect I think you will see in the expansion pack. Now, the developer is now a product developer in this context as well. So a developer, there was always this confusion, developer equals programmer. So we tried to clarify it a little bit more by saying, okay, a developer is now there to help build the product. Could be a programmer, could be a business analyst, or some other skills as well. And each product developer is fully responsible of shaping the valuable outcomes in the same context as we had it before. There's also a clear emphasis now much more on outcome over output. So Scrum isn't really about just delivering features, the amount, the output. And the current guide can be really read as that Scrum is a feature factory. It's about ordering, delivering. There's really no word about that much about outcome. Customer value is what really matters. So it's really about creating meaningful results, outcomes for the end user. And this has been also pointed out in a hopefully clearer way for you. Now, there was always also the problem, like we have a product owner, we have a product backlog, but we build an increment. Now, this we also tried to solve. And so there's still an increment, but there's now also a product artifact. So essentially the increment is what we built iterative and incrementally. So there's no change to the meaning as in the existing Scrum guide. But now essentially once we give it into the hands of the users, it's their product. And the product in that regard should deliver the outcome, the value for the users we are aiming for. So now there will be also a product increment as well. And in this context, it was revealing for us because suddenly we had increment and we had product. And we realized the different quality criteria we're actually looking for in regards to making sure we did it right. So now we have two definitions of done, if you want to think about it this way. So we have a definition of output done, which is, you can think about the classical definition of done. The definition of output done is about engineering standards, code quality, test coverage. But now we also have a definition of outcome done. Now, this is the evidence and the measurable, the impact for the users and the business. So the product impact we actually are looking for. So again, the definition of output done is for the increment. It's about technical completeness, ensuring the increment is shippable and meets the quality standards we are looking for. So this is about how we develop, how we test, how we integrate, how we document, how we handle non-functional requirements like regulations and other things, how we make sure security is covered as well. So essentially, it's about the product is professionally built of a high quality standard. Now, the definition of outcome done, this is kind of about the real world impact we are looking for. Did we make a difference with what we gave into the hands of the users? And it's much more focused on evidence, kind of outcome value from the user's perspective. And let's say we deliver a feature which is there to cancel a credit card once you lost it or it was stolen. And in the definition of outcome down, there could be something like at least 15% of our users who report a lost card use the in-app capability to freeze their card so they don't call up anymore. And therefore, we also hope that our support volume will drop by 25%, which is a big expense for us. And we hope that the customer satisfaction score stays the same, maybe even goes up because they say it's much more convenient to do it within the app. And the time to resolution decreases from 10 minutes. Maybe you have to be in the line to wait until you have somebody taking care of you to under 2 minutes. So this really shows whether the approach, the implementation of what we have done, and once we gave it to the users and they could work with it, solved the problem, achieved the impact, the outcome we are aiming for. Now, in this context, it's also much clearer that we now also focus on product discovery and validation. And this is covered to one degree through the definition of outcome done. So product creation is more than development. It is also understanding what is the problem we are going to solve, for whom are we going to solve, and how could we do it in a good way, and does it make sense to actually do it? So, if something provides high value and is low risk, well, okay, we are sure about it. Let's just do it. But maybe you have something which you believe provides high value, but is high risk. So maybe it could be a smart idea to first run a small experiment to learn to see whether this is meaningful to do and learn from that and then decide whether to go ahead with it, yes or no. So this idea about having this more closer to Scrum, discovery and validation helps to validate assumptions, discover what users really need and avoid waste. This is really an important aspect. And by the way, the outcome done in that regard is really our learning checkpoint. And we use that to measure, bring in the metrics as much as possible. We want to favor also in this regard, direct evidence. So this is much more clearly stated right now in the Scrum Guide expansion pack in contrast to what we have in the current Scrum Guide. In that context, it's also about the product owner. We want to make clear the product owner is more strategic. Again, going back to the 2020 Scrum Guide, you could read that the product owner is there to mechanically prioritize the product backlog, maybe write tickets, the Jira tickets, and works with the developers. But we believe the product owner isn't a task manager. And in the 2020 guide, as mentioned before, the product owner is often very transactional, like an order taker. So they should become strategic leaders, really balance the vision, work with the evidence, have some ideas, leverage emergence, and make smart decisions based on that. So, and a product owner shouldn't really be afraid to do product management work because that's what it boils down in the end of the day anyway. Now, vision is back. I always sensed in my trainings that people got confused about the product goal and the vision, and there wasn't too much mentioned about that. So vision is back, and think about the vision as the long-term goal, something which might take years to get there. Now, the product goal, we think it's more midterm. Personally, for me, I think along the time frames of 4 to 6 months, somewhere here like that. And so you have the long-term commitment of the vision, the next one, product goal, and then you have the smaller commitments in regards to the sprint goals, and always kind of anchoring going forwards along those lines. The other thing which came back are the acceptance criteria. They weren't mentioned, and again, there was confusion about that. And often what I also saw is that there was a confusion between what is the definition of done, what are acceptance criteria. And now we clearly describe what acceptance criteria are, feature fitness, but also now hopefully that helps to distinguish between now the definition of output done and the definition of outcome done, to make that clear and easier to understand. And then in context, what's also explained now are product backlog items. They were mentioned often, but not really kind of explained what they are. So we just made sure, hey, your product backlog is composed out of product backlog items. And usually these are the attributes you see in there. We also try to put a little bit more emphasis on the refinement. Our experience has shown us that the refinement is an important activity. You might think about it as an event, maybe not. It's kind of like somewhere in the middle. Some people just say, yes, we want to work with this way. Others say, well, for us, it doesn't really make that sense, but we think refinement is important. And it really helps us to break down and is more detailed in detail. One team, one product is also emphasized. So if possible, as long as possible, we really want to make sure that one team works for one product, to take out that the Scrum team as a feature factory working on several products in parallel, which is causing many, many problems. And because also this has one problem about what is really the outcome we are aiming for. What is it, what we want to achieve? And then also a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of scaling, because these days I think most teams are, once they understand Scrum and how it works, enter really quickly a scaled environment where there is several Scrum teams working on one product. And we talk about it. We give you some leads about what's important about this. It doesn't go too deep in it, but it gives you a little bit of context, what we think is important in that regard. So I think everything with the product thinking, what I've been talking about here right now, is really, it shows you that Scrum can be, if applied in the context, how we describe it in the expansion pack, can be a really true operating model. So how you can bring people together, how can we go about that? How do we put checkpoints in our process and make sure that we have clear outcome focus, good metrics, and learning, and a learning culture around this as well. Okay, Jeff, up to you.
Okay, well, for the last few years, I've been trying to.
Oops. Is this only me, or is this Jeff?
Yeah, it's a connection on Jeff's side. Yeah.
So
while we're waiting for Jeff to reconnect there, I just want to thank Peter for connecting myself, Ralph, and Jeff.
First principles in Scrum.
Jeff is back. Good. I think we still have an issue with this connection. So anyway, Peter was the link person. He connected. Peter and Ralph already knew each other, and Peter is obviously very involved in Jeff's organization, and they have a lot in common as well with, I believe, doing the Scrum Guide translation in German. Is that right, Peter?
More in the, to be frank, in the Scrum and Scale Guide translation.
Scrum and Scale one, yeah. Okay.
I'm part in the German Scrum community, and what I really like to see is that our communities connect as one whole global Scrum community. I really like to see that. Thank you for this initiative.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Wouldn't have happened without you.
Okay, we got Jeff back. So Jeff, you're back.
Welcome back.
Okay, sorry about that.
Could you start from the beginning again? Because I think you cut off immediately you started talking.
So we're trying to give a little deeper understanding of Scrum, because the 2020 guide was very short, which is very good for getting started, particularly in many domains like marketing, sales, and stuff like that. But then people have lots of questions. And so every week I'm getting asked these questions. Like, for example, Scrum is based on 3 pillars: empiricism, inspection, and adaptation. Well, where does that come from? Well, when Ken and I were first formalizing Scrum, he met with 2 of the leading system engineers in the world at DuPont, Ogunaki and Ray. And he explained to them that waterfall doesn't work. You're always late. And they said, well, that system doesn't work because your requirements change too much and too fast. They're very volatile. And so anyone that's clear thinking would know that that wouldn't work. And so then Scrum, Ken explained the idea of Scrum. And they said, well, what that is called empirical process control. And you should read this chapter in our book. So with empirical process control, you have a black box, you have inputs and outputs that you're constantly checking. So you're inspecting, and then based on what happens, then you change your behavior. That's what that's all about. But it turns out that you need to have a special environment of that. So if you dive a little deeper, we have the Scrum values, okay? Why do we say that openness, respect, and courage are so important? Because you can't have transparency without it. So that's where it starts. And then if you're going to inspect to do a really good job, you need to go deep. And so focus is absolutely imperative. And then adapting, you need more than just, okay, maybe I'll do that. You need a commitment to execute. So let's take that down a little lower into physics and mathematics. And if we go there, we go into what I use as John Boyd's energy maneuverability theory, which is a mathematical formulation of how in a fighter aircraft do you trade altitude for speed and speed for altitude, and how do you do that in exactly the right way to win? Because what we're about is winning. And that's why we've been talking about outcomes, right? It's only the outcomes that make you win. So Boyd says, observe, okay? This is the empirical thing. Then he says, orient. And that is positioning yourself really in the Toyota A3, the way Toyota is run, the root cause analysis. That is positioning yourself so you understand. And then once you get that right position, you decide in the intervention. And once you decide, then, you know, as a fighter pilot, the strike is immediate, right? So that speed of execution and then going right back into the cycle. And Boyd used a mathematical theory to then build the F-16 aircraft, which was the only aircraft that was cheaper than aircraft that had come before it and more maneuverable, right? We've never had that since. Everything has gone downhill since Boyd died. So there's multiple levels. When you go down to, we say Scrum is based on complexity, not predictability. Why is that? It's because things are complex. Things are unpredictable. Requirements are rapidly changing. And the goal of Agile in general and Scrum specifically is to change that velocity into value that allows you to win in the market, right? So you're actually using that change to fuel your competitive advantage against your opponents. And so that forces us is into rapid short cycles. And as we inspect and adapt in a cycle, changing what we're focusing on rapidly. And if you dive down deep into physics, if you read my book, you'll find that the most interesting thing that's happened, in my view, in physics in recent years is Wolfram's physics project, where he and his team of theoretical physicists have simulated the universe. And what they found out is if you simulate things, the amount of compute power it takes to simulate even something as simple as a project is infinite. So you can't ever know when the project will be done until you run the entire sequence. That's the way the universe works at absolutely the most fundamental level. Things are really complex down there. And so our whole system, biological systems, have evolved to inspect and adapt. Our brain is an inspection and adaptive mechanism. And the better we do it, the more we survive, right? We don't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger because we predicted that we should not go there. We should take this other route, right? And that brain, today, we're building mathematical models of the brain to run the robots. And the leading model is called Friston's free energy model of the brain. And what it's based on is the robot runs a simulation, then picks up a part. If something fails, they drop the part, then the simulation broke. Now the robot's got to step back and recalculate. That breakage is called Bayesian surprise. It's a statistical term. And to make the robot run well, we need to minimize Bayesian surprise. So in the background, what I'm trying to get just a little bit into the expansion pack is that the whole point of Scrum is to minimize Bayesian surprise, because when you come to the end of a sprint, if you're not done, now you've got management upset, you've got customers unhappy, the team's depressed. The cost of that Bayesian surprise, the replan, eats up all your ability to improve, and you flatline the Scrum. So there's a pattern. I've been trying to push more of the patterns into the expansion pack called teams that finish early accelerate faster. And that's because the venture groups I work with simulated or actually ran thousands and thousands of sprints and analyzed huge data set to figure out what makes a great team better than an average team. And there's only one point they could find. Great teams finish the sprint early. Average teams are not done with every story in the sprint at the end of the cycle. And that creates Bayesian surprise, which makes the robots not work, and it makes the Scrum team not work. So dealing with complexity, you have to understand not just the Citizen model, which is baked into the expansion pack, but you need to understand the human mind. You need to understand neuroscience, how people work. And in the world of AI, what we find, I've been running with an AI team, you need multiple AIs. And once you get multiple AIs, they have the same problem as any Scrum team. If they don't talk to one another, they don't perform. So one of my biggest challenges with my AI team has been in building a new product. They took 5 weeks to generate the first release full time. I was heads down with them, 6 AIs. It was painful. Coming into the second release, I was able to teach them the collaboration that we find in Scrum, and they immediately accelerated 500%. They were done in release 2 in 1 week. Release 1 took 5 weeks. And I said, wow, this is the same as happened to the first Scrum team at Easel. Once we figured out the daily meeting and how to collaborate, in 1 sprint, we accelerated 500%. So you actually have to teach the AIs how to do Scrum, and it's very logical to them. And one of the points we want to make in here is that today, you really need to be pairing with an AI if you're coding. The level of coding right now. Gemini 2.5 Pro is my lead coder right now. It's at the level of a senior PhD developer. When that Gemini starts going through and tells me how it's thinking through a problem, it actually is teaching me. And so AIs are becoming not just a tool that you prompt. It's becoming a system of thinking that you collaborate with. And so now as I work with the AIs, I'm not telling them to do something. I'm like a good product owner. Here is my problem. What ideas do you have? And invariably, just like in Scrum, the team usually comes up with a better idea than a directive Scrum Master or product owner. The AI will come up with a better idea than I can possibly come up with. And then I'll look at it and then I'll say, let's try that. And boom, 5 minutes later, it works, okay? So getting AI into the enhancement pack is a really important thing, given what's going on right now. Another aspect that we spent some time on is emergence. Why do things emerge? Okay, so then things emerge because of the 3 pillars of Scrum. You're inspecting and adapting. As soon as you inspect and adapt, you see the requirements that you thought you were going to do are now a little different, and you change the requirements. And that makes the product evolve in a direction that's often unexpected. That's the emergence. And we see the same thing happen in biological systems. And in the way evolution works in biology, it works the same way in product development. So we want to talk more and more about how we actually do what John Boyd does. How do you take advantage of the volatility of the requirements to actually innovate faster so that you win against your competition? You have to understand that emergent phenomenon of your product. It's going to grow. And particularly if you're working with AIs, it's going to change really fast. I found that, in order to rebuild a whole product, which sometimes you want to do when you get stuck in, an architecture that doesn't work for these new features, you might take 3 to 6 months if humans would do it. And AI can do that in a week. So we have rebuilt the product I'm working on from scratch at least a dozen times in the last year. And it's always done in less than a week. So the speed of emergence means if you're working with AI, you have to actually understand Scrum better than you used to take advantage of its capabilities. I think we talked enough about the cognitive load, but there are many neuroscience factors, as we've looked at, again, what makes great Scrum teams as compared to average Scrum teams. Great Scrum teams are tapping this finishing early phenomenon that reduces Bayesian surprise, but it also gives the brains of the team a dopamine rush. They get excited, right? So it's just like those of you who are runners, you get out there and run, particularly if you're a long distance runner, you do it long enough, all of a sudden you're getting high when you're running. It makes you want to run harder, run faster, run farther, and makes you want to win. And then you're really excited. And when the whole team gets like that, their performance moves to another level. So as a Scrum Master, how are you going to tap that? And there are 7 other really important neuroscience factors. And one of them is triggered by, we used in the first Scrum team, we used the Adidas video of the all-black rugby team haka, and the haka stimulates the vagus nerve, and what it does is it makes everybody settle down and become fearless. And in that fearlessness, they also feel a sense of unitedness. So they become a fearless, powerful force. And this is why the All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand have won more World Cups than any team ever in any sport. Because they become an absolutely fearless, unified force to be reckoned with. And the great Scrum teams embody that capability. So Scrum enables fast learning, fast adaptation, responding to requirements more quickly. The more volatile the environment is, the more complex it is, and the more leverage Scrum gives you. And so we're trying to get some of these things. We can't put them in a short paper like the 2020 Scrum Guide, but we can augment the 2020 Scrum Guide and get people a lot deeper into Scrum that will make them a lot more successful in implementing it. And I think I've hit my time limit, so over to you, John.
Good stuff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Rav. Thank you, Peter. And I just want to say something very important before I go into my section, that Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. If you want to get trained on Scrum, you want to get certified in Scrum, you go to all the gold standard organizations like Scrum.org, Scrum Alliance, Scrum Inc. That's where you go. That's where you get your training and you're good to go. Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. And we also refer to a simple guide to Scrum as well from Tobias Mayer as well and his colleagues. If you don't want to read something as long as the Scrum Guide of 13 pages, you want to read 2 or 3 pages, you can go to look at that. The document that we're sharing today is expanding on Scrum. And so when you expand, it means you make it bigger, you don't make it smaller. So it's kind of interesting that within a few weeks, we have a document that's making Scrum much shorter. And now we're saying we're not changing Scrum because all we're doing is we're just expanding on it. Lots of additions and lots of suggestions, but what's in the Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. So if you get into an argument with someone, it's what's in the Scrum Guide, not what's in the expansion pack. Okay, so that's the first thing I just wanted to reiterate. Don't want anybody to be confused about that point. Okay. The second thing I just want to bring up as well is that in expanding the document, we put a lot more emphasis on humanity, on ethics, on behavior, and on coherence. And if you want coherence, one of the things that you need is to maybe understand what you're talking about. So for example, a few days ago, I was talking to one of my peers and we're having a debate and I asked the question, well, what do you mean by that word? And my peer had a different opinion about what that word meant. And that's half the problem. So what we've done in this document is if we felt a word wasn't absolutely clear and understood, well, we said, well, okay, how about we explain it? And so product is defined. And that was really difficult, by the way, because the world does not agree on what a product is, but we had a good go. And this document will be updated every few months. So in September, there will be a new release of this. And someone asked, are we planning to do a new guide? No, we're not planning to do any new Scrum Guide. That's not what this is about. This is the expansion pack, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we define product, we define stakeholder, mentioned 14 times in the 2020 Scrum Guide. Now it's clear what it is. All the different types of stakeholder, not just internal people, but also customers, end users, legislators, governance, and so on. Very specific about all of those. Value, what is value? And what's professionalism? Because we talk a lot about professionalism, but what do we mean by that? What's an impediment? What's technical debt? What's customer experience debt? What's user experience debt? All these things all these words that people throw around, we thought, well, let's have a go at trying to define those. So now you have something that you say, okay, this is what we mean when we say those things. And then what we tried to do is we tried to improve the coherence of Scrum with the environment that you're working in. And Jeff talked about AI, for example. So there are lots of possibilities with AI. And there are lots of dangers with AI. So we provided guidance on how you could still keep humans accountable for what happens in the Scrum team. You can use these tools to help you, but who knows? In 3 months' time, maybe the agentic robots have taken over. I don't know, but that's why we need to keep the document up to date, because we don't know what's going to happen. But right now, we think there needs to be what we call a human in the loop, but actually a human really at the center, really driving the whole thing, and the weight is squarely on their shoulders. That you can use these tools, but don't say, oh, sorry, it was the AI. No, it was you. Like, you're on the team. So that's a really important thing. Also, what we did as well is we looked at the coherence of product management that Ralph was talking about. So instead of assuming that we're delivering value, how about we define value, but also say, well, we're delivering potential value, and discovery is made more coherent with Scrum. You don't have to go to a class to find out how do you mix discovery with delivery. We figured it out. Lots of you have figured it out already, but we wrote it down. So those of you who hadn't figured it out, well, this is kind of an idea without kind of falling into recipes. These are things that you could look at. These are the considerations you should look at. We reduced the friction that there still was a little bit with Kanban. So Jeff talked about finishing work early, which is a really important thing, actually, finishing work early. But also, if you have some items at the end of the sprint and you didn't quite get them to done, hopefully that doesn't happen that often, because that's not great. But some teams are very adaptive, and they do have items going across the boundary. So is it really right for that item to go back onto the product backlog? And in Scrum Guide, it would say you put it back onto the product backlog, you resize it. We're suggesting that, maybe you leave it where it is if you're confident it's going to go into the next sprint. Why would you upset your flow metrics just because, why would you put an item back and reset your metrics? That didn't make much sense to us. So we gave that option there as well. Also, what if you get all of your work to do with the sprint goal done early? What do you do then? Well, then you can keep chasing more work towards the product goal. We're being clearer about that. We talk as well about the different types of stakeholder, but also inanimate stakeholders. Often what happens is what people do is they focus too much on the animate stakeholders, the humans, but also sometimes there's things like the law, for example. The law is the law is the law. And so you could very well think you're illegal, but actually you might have an issue because maybe we've got a situation where we're not actually compliant and so on. We also talked about value realization. How do you ensure that teams don't just focus on delivery, but also, when we deliver that thing towards that particular outcome, did we hit the bullseye? Did we achieve what we were hoping for? And then that ties in with strategy as well. Are we coherent with strategy? So we tied into Roger Martin's work and Tom Gilb's work, for example, and to an extent Dave Snowden's work as well when you go into the more complex space. How do you deal with emergent strategy? We've been very clear about that, at least where you can start with that. The product owner is a strategic thinker. And essentially what we've done as well in this is we've created a lot of content that we hope you'll find helpful, particularly management, other types of change agent if you have managers in your organization. How can you help teams to be more effective with Scrum? How can you create that environment? And so we brought in some ideas from the adaptive enterprise, like beyond budgeting, for example, humanocracy, sociocracy. These are things that you can think about. Dave Marquet's intent-based leadership and immunity to change, lots of little ideas like that. Because what we don't want is a situation where the work in the Scrum team is incoherent with what's happening in the environment. We want everything. We want it now, and we want it even yesterday, and we want maximum quality and all these things. I love what Johnny Ive says as well, by the way, about you can still achieve quality at speed. And in fact, that's where we're going. We're talking about adaptiveness at speed. But let's try to be coherent about that and not leave people in a place where they don't really have what's needed, if that makes sense. So essentially what we've done is we put this back together to help you to have a more successful Scrum adoption. Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. You want to find out about Scrum, you go to the Scrum Guide. You want a shorter version of Scrum, you go to a simple guide to Scrum. You want to find those Hexi cards, you might have heard of them, Scrum Hexis, you look at those, they'll give you a 2025 view of the 2020 Scrum Guide. But if you want some guidance about how you help your environment to be coherent with agility, maybe this is something that you can be looking at. How can you make your organization more adaptive, more humane, more effective, more efficient, and so on? So we've been delighted to be doing this. Myself, Ralph, and Jeff, and Peter have been involved in this. Lots of reviewers have been involved as well. Some have been named, some have not been named for understandable reasons, but lots of people were involved. I think it's well over 30 people giving us very detailed feedback. So that sometimes took us hours to go through, myself, Ralph, and Jeff, and Peter. So really grateful. And the good news is that we will be accepting feedback from the community as well. So when we show you the website in a few minutes, you will be able to basically have a discussion about maybe future ideas for the Scrum Guide expansion pack. So this is for the community. It's we want to be as open as possible to make sure that you can have your say and maybe some suggestions for improvements, or maybe you see some bugs or there's some incorrect references or whatever. So maybe you can check that out. So yeah, so that's my little bit. So I think we've kind of whipped up a bit of interest here, Peter, Jeff, and Ralph. So I think people might be getting a little bit impatient.
So, okay. So Scrum is still Scrum, but if you're interested about the Scrum Guide expansion pack, what I'll be doing, and I hope it works, I will paste the URL to the website, and you should see it hopefully in the screen. Give me a second. I click on it. Ta-da, here's the URL. We were promised this site will hold. So go there, read it, download the guide. The English version is available as a PDF in A4 as well as a letter format, and it's online readable on the web page as well. We put everything onto GitHub, so that is also the collaboration tool. And go there. If you have some ideas, feedback, let us know. And going forward, we plan to make frequently releases. So right now we are aiming probably September around to just, because we had many good ideas, we got good feedback. Now it's out in the open. We will get even more good feedback, and we try to bring then these into the expansion pack as well. So have fun reading it.
And of course, another question, what is the impact of the expansion pack on Scrum exams? 0 impact. There is no impact. Scrum is described in the Scrum Guide. Scrum Guide is your go-to reference for Scrum. You want to find out about Scrum? You go to the Scrum Guide. You want some suggestions for some additions depending on your context, you can check out the Scrum Guide expansion pack. You want some more explanations about things, what is a product, what is a customer, what's a user, all these things that we take for granted, check out the expansion guide. Okay, so it's not for everyone. We appreciate that. It's going to be really kind of targeted at curious change agents, including managers. And so, maybe you want a simpler document, that's fine. That's why Scrum Guide is still there. That's why we have other sort of resources, materials, and so on. But if you're curious, the document is well referenced. So not only is it bigger than Scrum Guide, it also has references with hyperlinks and books. So I'm sorry, we've opened some doors and windows into other stuff that maybe you might want to learn about. So, because there's a lot to learn. We tried to do our best to condense it into the document. So Jeff, any comments from you before we wrap up today? And I'll have a chat with Ralph as well and Peter.
I would just echo what you just said, that under the Creative Commons license for the Scrum Guide, anybody can create a document about the Scrum Guide as long as they reference the original, which is what we've done here. And in fact, there are several individuals that have created very good documents of this type about the Scrum Guide. And we've even referenced, I think, 2 of them in the expansion pack. I think the expansion pack is useful because all of us have spent a lot of time actually creating the 2020 Scrum Guide with Ken. Okay, so we really know a lot of what's important. And we also know a lot of what we had to leave out that is now confusing people. We're trying to put a little bit of more stuff in there to make it easier to adopt for some people.
Thank you, Jeff. Ralph, what about you?
Well, it was an interesting journey. So it started off with the working on the Scrum.org axis, realizing things have moved on since 2020, and going through all of that and working with we reached out to all trainers from different organizations, people using Scrum on a daily basis, other people collecting the feedback, bringing all of that in here, and it was a really interesting journey, which started probably last year in August, so it took us quite some time. So there's lots of manpower, lots of work, weekends, nights in there. So hopefully you get something out of it. And if there's something you don't like, something you want like to have changed, go to GitHub and let us know about it.
We didn't emphasize that this is going to be an evolving document, something that I've always wanted to do, and it's going to go up on GitHub, right, John? So
yeah, that's right.
Anybody can submit a proposal for change to GitHub, or if they don't know how to use GitHub, they can probably send it to us. And so, John, you're thinking maybe quarterly updates to this document are kind of standard. Things are evolving too fast right now, in my view, to not evolve this document on a regular cadence.
Yeah. It should be a living document, going with the time, new ideas, new technology, whatever emerges, we'll handle it. We want to handle it.
So, Peter, what about you? Any closing comments from you?
Well, we always say that in the Scrum Guide, there are the rules of the game, but it doesn't make you a great team. We hope that the Scrum expansion pack will make you a great team and a great organization. I'm really looking forward to the impact of this document.
Thank you, Peter. And for me as well, and I think for a lot of trainers and consultants out there as well, I think it'll kind of bring up the level of our conversations where the basics are understood well. And instead of maybe people coming to people like ourselves here on this live stream, maybe what's happening is you already understand all those really good topics, and now you're trying to up your game to the next level. How can we actually improve the coherence of our Scrum adoption and other types of adoption in your organizations? How can we work better with product management? How can we use these AI tools? How can we make sure that we've got a humane environment where people can be effective at the lowest costs and be really adaptive to market needs, and not just external customers and users, but also internal stakeholders, because there's a level of tension as well also with internal stakeholders. A lot of inspiration from the various reviewers as well, and really some really leading thinkers. You'll see in the references some of the people who've inspired us, but I'm sure there's lots of people that we've forgotten that they inspired us, and maybe we'll think of those in the September update. But if you spot anything, just let us know. It's a document, it's on GitHub, you can join the discussion, and you're more than welcome to contribute. We'd love to get some ideas and how we can make the document better. I want to thank everyone so much for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's just a few comments left, so I'll just throw them up on screen if that's all right. So yeah, since the what and the why, that looks pretty good. I like the update. Okay, there's someone giving kind of an update for everybody else, so that's kind of cool as well. Lovely to see all of your comments. We will repost this as well, so it'll be available as well later on. Please share the recording. Please share the document as well with your colleagues. Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. How many times do we say that? Scrum Guide still describes Scrum. Scrum
enough, hopefully. Yeah.
So no confusion. We're expanding on it, making our possibilities bigger. So enjoy it, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Over and out, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.